Hey guys, welcome back to the Roman Rodez Podcast. I'm Roman.
I'm Rodez.
And today we're going to be talking about some conspiracies.
Well, specifically the 27 Club.
The 27 Club, yeah.
Some of your ears might be picking up. It is indeed that one of note. Now, I didn't realize I had a connection to this story, sort of. So basically...
You were telling me earlier about this whole
white lighter
thing.
I'm telling you about this right... No, yeah.
All
so
right.
I used to work at a drive-thru. And where I work now, too, we sell lighters. We sold lighters over there. Now, some people have preferences. Oh, whatever color. Or like, oh, I like the red ones. I like the greens. But I noticed a few times people were like, I want no white lighters. Absolutely none at all.
And
it's
these are
like,
just regular cigarette lighters, right?
yeah, they're just like
Normal
Bics
stuff?
and Jills. And I was like, those are the only ones we had.
Okay.
And I think sometimes they were okay with clear ones, but some of them it was too close to being a white lighter.
Uh-huh.
And they just said it was bad luck. And I was like a black cat. And the guy was like, no, it's just a thing. And it turns out this actually sort of leaked into, as they would call, cannabis culture, but it stems from origin of the 27 Club. Now, 27 Club is in reference to
a whole bunch of musicians, and including some actors who died at the age of 27. This whole
entertainers and artists.
Entertainers, artists who died at the age of 27. And there's a whole list. If you go to wikipedia.com, you can put in 27 Club and see the whole list of everybody.
And it is always growing, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, because there was a person
allegedly,
who just died this past month who was on the list.
K-pop, too.
No, somebody else.
Oh,
I just saw, yeah. But I don't know who they were.
Well, supposedly,
so
some of the original... Jimi Hendrix was one of the ones, I think, for sure, Kurt Cobain was one of the most recent ones attributed to having had a white lighter on them at the time of their death. And I think there was also a few others, but supposedly here's the thing, that's a supposedly. Now there was Kurt Cobain did apparently have two lighters around him, but neither of them were white, none of them were in his pocket. And supposedly the same thing with Jimi Hendrix and the other singers who were on earlier in the century. I think they said Bic. Bic apparently didn't make white lighters at the time. They didn't start making them until sometime in the 90s. And now, while other lighter companies did make white lighters, they weren't as widely distributed. Like, was it Bic?
Yeah, Bic. Or they weren't as common.
I just don't know.
B-I-C.
It's so hard to say, too, because I just always think, like, how do you think? Like, we're going to make pins and lighters. Those are our two staples. Pins and lighters. Fire and writing. What if there's like some secret code you have to write with like a Bic pen and then you set it on fire and it's like it opens up the gateways. You have to draw that little guy with the little ballpoint pinhead.
Yeah,
but and now here's the thing though, these were it was predominantly musicians. They are known to travel, for different shows, so they might have had access to these rare white lighters. Now that being said, from what I've seen on the official reports, was not a thing.
So this is just kind of maybe a myth that that all these people who died, they did have the white lighters on a point when they died, but there could also be like, well, maybe.
Well, officially they didn't.
They didn't.
None of them did.
All right.
Well, the ones who did have lighters around them, it was none of them were white. Okay. It was just sort of a thing. I think it just sort of sounded cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of origin to something. And I bet you somebody, because a lot of this happened and it started. Oh no, it started earlier. I was gonna say it started in the 60s and 70s, but you found an account, one of the early account of the 27 Club beginning.
The idea of the 27 Club did start in the 70s with the deaths of Brian Jones, who was with the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, because they all died within 2 years. Within a 2-year span.
That's when that song, the lyric comes from, right? The Day the Music Died.
Yeah. We're listening to that earlier.
Yeah, man. It's like I used to think that song was about
American
the end
Pie.
of the world because it sounds so sad, but it's just about that. It's about like all these great musicians passing away. And if I'm not mistaken, we're not also the guys died in that plane crash, the Big Boppa.
Yes.
And Buddy Holly
and Richie Valens. Richie Valens, my hero.
Richie. Was Selena too?
No, these people aren't on the. Selena was younger. She was wasn't she 23, 24?
I think so. But Richie, but it was that
Richie
wasn't a plane crash.
He was 17 when he died.
Oh, that's right, man.
Yeah, the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly were older.
I think we just sort of kind of throw this as like a blanket term for young deaths.
But I think there's a whole like idea around the deaths of celebrities. Whenever a celebrity dies, everybody kind of
comes together because it's a thing they can connect with a stranger about.
Yeah, and it becomes a story. And I think it's just what happened with this whole idea of the 27 Club is just like stories like, oh, look at all these people who died at the age of 27, they all happened to be musicians. Because I know some scientists were saying, well, normal people die every day at different ages.
It wasn't just scientists; they did a full study on it, right? And the British
I don't know. Is
Journal
it scientists?
Science,
Who did the study? I don't know who did the study.
No, I saw it. There was the British Journal of Scientific Inquiry, something. But they did. They basically, and I say study, but basically they just looked at the facts of They found a bunch of famous people. They looked at their death facts. They saw when they died, and they said there was no causation or correlation of people dying at 27. What happened was the reason 27 stuck is because the big names died at that age. Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, and like just
Amy Winehouse.
Amy Winehouse, yeah, like it's big names that do happen to drop on there, but other people like Michael Jackson wasn't 27.
He wasn't 27.
Prince, not 27. No. And even like farther back in the day, a lot of other musicians died. They weren't very young, and to be fair, too, a lot of them were known as overdoses. It was drunk driving, accidents. But some of them were a bit odd.
Yeah, but I think also it's because all these people who died at the age of 27 did have like other stories surrounding them.
True.
Well, the very first on Wikipedia, the very first person on the list is a person by the name of Alexander Levy, who died in 1892.
Yeah.
So I guess he's the inaugural.
And his is the one I could see his life and death starting the origin of this, because he is famous or supposedly for
not yet.
What was this guy? What did he do?
Alexander Levy. He was a composer, but he was the first person that they say fits into the categorization of 27 Club. He died at the age of 27. He probably just led a horrible life, and nobody knows how he died.
Or they led an awesome life,
maybe too,
and they know exactly how he died.
And
you've been living too good of a life, Johnny. You can't take it anymore. Pay us back.
But then
the money back first.
Okay, now we're hopping up a few years to, what was the year?
The 18th century.
1938.
It's quite a few years.
Robert Johnson.
Who? His name was Robert Johnson.
His name was Robert. Fight Club reference.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
It's a good thing you told people.
Yes.
Okay, Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson,
he was
the one who was a Delta Blues musician. He has a story around him that he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads to learn how to play guitar. So there was even this other, worldly story around him. And he said that when he was, I don't know what age he said he went to meet the...
16, I believe.
Was it 16? Yeah, I know he was young. But that he said he wanted to sell his soul to the devil to learn how to play guitar. Mm-hmm. And he went out into the crossroads in some fields in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And he met up with the devil, who they described as a large black man. And that the devil took his guitar, tuned it, played a few songs, gave it back to Johnson, and Johnson then had the power to play whatever he wanted on the guitar. There is also an alternate story that it wasn't the devil he meant, but it was Papa Legba, who was a voodoo spirit.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, this thing has different layers to it.
Man, I want to watch the movie already.
They did make a movie in the 90s with Ralph Macchio.
Really?
But it was like... it was like them following the story of Robert Johnson, so it wasn't really directly Robert Johnson.
I want to see the movie of it.
Or if you see, Oh Brother Where Art Thou? There's a character named Tommy Johnson, who Tommy Johnson was also a real blues player, no relation to Robert Johnson, but they kind of both had the story associated with them. Wow. But yeah, so Robert Johnson. Creepy. Yeah, so he had this kind of strange life. He didn't have much popularity during his life. Yeah. After he died, some of his recorded material came back up, and then he became kind of like known as a really great blues musician.
Oh, now here's the reference: is he traded his soul for talent? He should have traded it for fame.
That's another layer to the story.
They learned the lesson, with the social media celebrities of the future. It's like, we don't have to be good; we just have to be fabulous.
You're fabulous. All right, yeah.
Boom.
But so it says that nobody knows exactly what he died of, but there is another story associated with this, that he had been playing at these parties and dances.
Yeah. They guys
met a woman, became friendly with a woman.
Yeah.
And that her husband poisoned him.
I was thinking of a different story entirely. I think
you're thinking of a different. See, that's the thing. There's so many stories,
and it's just been spun out. You know what the thing? The guy probably died of like alcohol poisoning, or like
it's probably there was some theories when he died that he was poisoned with strychnine, but they say that's such a powerful poison that he would have been able to taste it right away because
Yeah.
they said they poisoned some liquor or a beer or something.
And to be fair, back in the
wouldn't
day,
have worked.
everything was made out of poison. You know, we might be thinking like, I'm going to poison this man, and somebody else is thinking like, oh, let me just freshen up your drink again, and you know, like, oh yeah, this used to be a strychnine jar, but you know, I just put some liquor on top of it, clean it out with clean water. Yeah, well, I'm a fancy guy like that. Just take your drink.
Here's your
in
mug.
the day.
It's lead lined to protect it from.
Yeah, that's
from
how
things,
it was
right?
back in the day.
It was. So I mean, basically, I think maybe he did die at the age of 27. Probably got poisoned somewhere along the way. Probably there's some truth to it that somebody didn't like him
Well, makes
and
sense.
poisoned him.
I was kind of going off the story.
Which story?
I think it's a little bit based from, what was it? They used some, I think it was Supernatural. An episode where basically he's playing guitar in like a small little gin joint, like a small bar.
Yeah.
Everybody's really getting into it. And, you know, he has a heart attack and died. But he started hallucinating first. And the thing is, what he's hallucinating is the hellhounds coming from him.
Ooh.
The thing that makes that, he actually did reference hellhounds in some of his songs. And there was always like, you know, something trained hell, something hellhound on my hills and stuff like that. If you look at the lyric, he had a lot of, now he always say there was a lot of I don't know what you'd call like dark imagery in his music, but the Deep South at that time, still to this day, it always had a bit of a crossover with like voodoo,
like
Santeria,
voodoo,
and yeah, like they have some stuff in there that gets pretty dark. So it is from the era. I don't know, and I could see where this would spin off into making people think like there's a darker layer to this, like something just kept spinning out because a lot of these people, they got fame or talent and skill from nowhere. I know Jimi Hendrix kind of popped up out of nowhere. Kurt Cobain popped up out of nowhere. I'm sure people are saying, well, actually, Kurt Cobain was friends with the guy at some place.
One of the things is in a modern age, you know, we have all the social media stuff. I think we talked about it in another podcast, but how, you know, we can kind of see the behind the scenes of people and how like certain people become famous.
We don't need a behind
the
was it behind the music at the time, where they would show like how dark and sad your celebrity lives were?
But it was kind of like sometimes we would back in the day we didn't know about these people who like struggled for so many years to get to the where they were.
Truly believed in the image of the superstar, of its glamorous,
and they just popped up out of nowhere, you know, because we didn't know, we couldn't
fully formed.
Fully formed, because we didn't hear the stories behind them.
Elvis just dropped out of the sky, you know, wearing that, and he was just like singing and happy all the time.
Oh, Elvis. All right, so well, going back, okay, so talking about like all those stories, you know, so Brian Jones is another person on the list. He was the original founder of the Rolling Stones. I almost said the Beatles. Had the Beatles on my mind. The Rolling Stones. Man. He died at the age of 27, but this is a little tricky.
Tell me okay. Tell me the story. What happened?
His Swedish girlfriend, I forgot her name. I didn't write her name down. Swedish girlfriend.
Yeah, if you did, it wouldn't help you say her name at all. It wouldn't help.
Anna something. She found him around midnight, face down in a pool.
Witching hour.
Yeah, in the middle of the pool. She said that she could tell that he was still alive, or she thought he was still alive. They got him out of the pool, went to the hospital, and he died from drowning. But they said he did have a lot of alcohol and like drugs in the system.
I thought you were gonna say the pool was empty.
I mean,
that empty pool. That would kill you too, though.
That would kill you too if you fell.
Yeah. Now that did sound. The first time you told me this, I think you just said that they found him in the pool at midnight and a full moon. I was like, that's terrifying. But then you bring like alcohol and drugs in the system. It's like he walked into a pool.
But see, that's the thing. There's so many like normal things. It's sad.
Still sad.
But there's like it's like a normal thing about it. But if you hear it, probably a lot of people just heard the part that, you know, he was found in his pool at midnight. That is creepy. And, you know, kind of you think, you know, what, you know,
because
like
they say midnight, like she was walking around at midnight with the, you know, they didn't have cell phones at the time. They just read her watch in the middle of the night, when it's like she found him at like, you know, 1:25 to 11:30, and it was like midnight. And it's like, that's how time was back in the day. It flowed differently.
But, you know, and then, well, see, and then this was after this, it's going off a little tangent. Mick Jagger and
Mick Jagger's never a tangent. He's a subject.
Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, they kind of stepped up. They had to step up in the band, in the Rolling Stones, and then that's when they kind of shot a little bit more to fame, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stories like that where you hear like somebody famous dying,
and I bet you there's
like other people kind of. I'm not saying anything. I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
But the conspiracies that we've been talking about out there are that there's usually nefarious causes.
Stories can stem out of this.
Because I've brought up a little bit before it that a lot of these stories come from basically the theory is that there's people around somebody who's making a lot of money fast. They don't know how to spend it, how to use it, instead of being taken advantage of. The person either finds out or is not being, easily manipulated enough. So his so-called friends around him basically take him out, and then they'll step up to get money or more famous. Now we're not making that accusation, but this is what a lot of these conspiracy theories around why it happens, around why it's young. I'm straying away from 27 Club, but just young musicians tend to die.
There's stories like that around concerning Lady Gaga. That's another conspiracy. It not really doesn't fit under the 27 Club, but that's another one that we can talk about maybe at a later date. But where she, there was another woman who recorded songs with her, and then she ended up dying under mysterious circumstances.
I heard about that.
Yeah,
creepy.
But I don't know. All right. Well, one of the things about Brian Jones' death, they said. At the hospital.
Which one was he again?
Brian Jones is the leader of the original founder of Rolling Stones. He was found in the pool. Yeah. They said that his death was death by misadventure. Ooh. So that kind of puts a weird spin
sounds
on
weird,
it.
but then they used to. That's an old timey
phrasing
phrasing
so.
that they would
use.
It'd be like what was it? Consumption. That was basically meant they kind of lost weight and we don't know what killed them. Yeah. And that was fever, cancer, different types of plague. And it was it's just a term that they used that was a broadband thing. So it just means, it sounds like death by your own personal negligence.
I guess that would be a better way to put it.
Misadventure sounds like he went on a zany trip. He was just I'm running around his mansion and he's I'm going to go visit Atlantis. Makes it sound yeah, exactly. It sounds disrespectful. That's my point.
Yeah, so some other people that are on the 27 Club list, one of the more famous people that I think anybody would recognize, of course, Jimi Hendrix. He died in 1970. Death. Well, it was a strange case. He was with a friend. They had hung out, or they were spending some time together. They were staying in a hotel, and then the friend found him the next morning, unconscious, and they said he died basically. From asphyxiation because he was intoxicated on barbiturates.
Oh, okay. That's a big one about the rock stars dying, and they're basically asphyxiated. They threw up, and then they were laying face down.
Yeah.
And they sort of
But it was a thing that it was just this one person had spent the entire last day with him. Yeah. So I guess there was some stories, saying, oh, well, it's this or that, a cover up or whatever, just because they had just one witness to his death, basically. Yeah. But yeah, he died at the age of 27, 1970. Also in 1970 was Janis Joplin. She died from a drug overdose.
I don't think Janis Joplin was a big one at the time, but I feel like a lot of people the younger generation aren't as familiar with her work. Check out her stuff. Great music, great singer, and it's really good.
Me and Bobby McGee. That song is a classic.
All of her stuff. It's so good. Her stuff. She was a really great vocalist. Man. Yeah, she was great,
and she was just starting to rise to the top too before she died. She wasn't that. She hadn't discovered much fame before she died. But see, so basically, Brian Jones in 69, Jimi Hendrix in 70, Janis Joplin in 70. And Jim Morrison, he died from heart failure in 71. They were all the ones who started this whole idea of the people afterward, their deaths inspired this whole thing of the 27 Club.
Somebody who put it in a paper, they were just got clever, hey, look at all these guys died when they were 27. I'll call it the 27 Club, and I'll put that on the headline of paper. Gosh, I'm smart. A million conspiracies later.
And probably that's the way that things happen.
Somebody was doing math too, and it was the number 27 correlates with a lot of stuff. What else could I find with the number 27? Bunch of celebrities died. Let me throw it in.
What's that Jim Carrey? Oh, no, that's the number 23.
Yeah.
I thought it was number 27. I was
underrated movie, in my opinion.
Haven't seen it, so I can't judge.
Weird to say.
Yeah, so there has been, after 71, there were a bunch of other people who they say, they're on the list.
People have been dying since that time. People have been dying
in general.
What's the connection?
The next one that came up that was big, that kind of brought this whole thing back up, the talk back up, was Kurt Cobain.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
94.
And this is also another death that there's a straightforward version, but there's also some strange things, I would say, that led people to question the validity of it actually being, for those who don't know, it was a suicide.
It was a suicide.
And his suicide note supposedly was written in 2 different pens and slightly different hand styles. Now, some people say it's because he was ambidextrous. Other people say that he was probably sober when he wrote part of it, and kind of emotional and maybe on some drugs when he wrote the second part. But other people theorize if you just read the first part, it seems more like a straight apology. He's saying, I'm sorry to, and it's like a lot of suicide notes are apologies. I'm saying, sorry to his bandmates for making the sinner. But there were some key words, and they're talking about turning things around. And like it seemed like there was planning to be a future in the letter. It was just
so it's kind of like a reconciliation.
Exactly.
Letter.
It was more of a reconciliation letter that he was going to change, not that he was going to end himself. But the second part has more final notes of like, I never deserved any of this, and this isn't what I wanted, and this isn't who I wanted to be. And so it seemed like very different tones. And some people say it seems like it was written by a different person. Other people say he might have started it as a reconciliation letter, and it just like, you know what? I can't reconcile this. Let me just, keep going.
Okay.
And also, too, I believe there was a bit strangeness, too, with like his method of suicide. I heard it was like a shotgun blast.
That's okay. So that's some of the details that I haven't really read into.
There's a lot.
The death of Kurt Cobain, but there's all these ideas and stories that I've heard. So as I'm thinking about it, it's like I don't know any concrete details about how he died, but I know the legacy or the what would you call it? The stories,
man.
the
I think legacy
the
would be a part.
embellishments or whatever.
And embellishments too. Now, also too, his would fit into the whole, him going against the whole fame thing. He was uncomfortable with it. But there's also too, all these people could have been very troubled, and they might have still died around the same time without any fame. They clearly, a lot of them had demons. A lot of them were into drugs and alcohol heavily before they got famous. Some people, that's just their personality type. And the difference is that, and it still happens to this day, whenever you're, rising to the top, people don't think to help you and say, are you okay? Because to them, you looked okay, especially in the earlier years, whenever people looked down on people looking out for help. They would see, Jimi Hendrix, doing 2 tabs of acid on his eyes and think that's awesome, and not think to ask, why do you want to escape this world so much?
I guess that's the thing is it's very easy to surround yourself with people,
sycophants,
who are more along for the ride than watching out for you, especially in that career. I know
you have money.
I know I've read a lot of.
I don't have money, and I've got sycophants. Thanks, guys.
I've read a lot of autobiographies from musicians, from Korn and from the Red Hot Chili Peppers and even Neil Young. And
that's
it's
a lot of variety right there.
Yeah.
What's the common theme? What do they
The common
all say?
three is kind of like the people around them at certain points in their life are all like either oblivious to the things because the other people are dealing with their own issues.
I can see that.
Or just people like, hey, let's go party. And I think it was maybe one of the Korn guys who wrote that they would go on tour with Snoop Dogg. And Snoop Dogg would just have these like this group,
an entourage.
That's the word I was looking for. Entourage. And they would just like have food and have alcohol and drugs and stuff, and it was just like a party all the time.
Exactly what you would think of Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. And he said that they would have all the southern food that they would have catered in just to eat after the show, and it's like it becomes like this whole different lifestyle where like it's just everybody's there like, hey, let's have a good time and stuff. And I can see easily, especially in the 70s, that kind of
with the Snoop Dogg Korn, that would have been early 2000s.
Yeah.
Right. Man.
Yeah, I think that was early 2000s. Late 90s or early 2000s.
Well, there's that whole thing. It is a different type of world whenever you experience that. And the thing is, too, I think the reason it hits artists a little bit harder than it does other people is with other types of businesses, or other types of careers, I should say. Whenever you have a rise to the top, it tends to be pretty slow and fairly arduous. It can take decades, and a lot of people, that's why you see, old men driving nice new cars because it took them that long to get it. The reason you see younger people, it's either because they inherited money a lot of times. There's the odd, random success story if they had a great idea and it spun off. But being an artist that, in a movies, music, so many other things, mostly those two. Yeah. Then it could jump overnight within 1 year.
Oh, yeah.
You could go from struggling homeless to having more money than everybody in your family combined will ever make in their lives. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. You said 27 years old, died in a pool in a mansion that he owned, and it's like he didn't come from money.
Yeah.
That was real quick overnight. And yeah, man, think about it too. Also, Snoop Dogg, he's still alive, thank God. But it's like, you know, I mean, think about it. He also came from a very, you know, not super poor, but he just had he was a regular kid life, and he went to having like literally everything catered to him.
I know this is different, maybe different details or different story, but the guy Eazy-E from NWA, I wonder how old he was when he died. I know he died from a sickness.
I think.
But there's a conspiracy also about that he was infected with HIV.
I've heard that too. There a lot of them. There's conspiracy. There's actually a movie. No, I think it is a series. It's about Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, really?
And it's about the cover-up supposedly. It's going into their deaths.
Tupac, yeah. And
there's theories, a ton of them. Well, I should say, it happens a lot in rock and roll, but country and hip-hop especially, if somebody dies, there's usually a conspiracy behind it.
Yeah.
Which does seem to be a southern thing, I guess. You know, both sort of originate in the South, if you think of right. Famous. Well, no, I mean, like East Coast, West Coast isn't really a Southern thing, but a general Southerniness. It is a pretty. I don't know where I'd go with that. I had no idea what this word is, but the idea, basically that they. Okay, my point being, there's usually a conspiracy to go with it.
Yeah.
Now, both of these groups, you know, country and hip hop, sort of the music that they get into is about, you know, usually about rebelling from like the life that they're in, and you know, sort of doing what you want, and
maybe coming from a really like evangelical Christian background, family kind of thing, and like
super conservative
kind of thing, and you know, going off and just finding yourself and doing what you want.
Both talk about trouble with the law, you know, because they like to party too hard, they like to drink, they like to do what they want, and there's run-ins with the law, and they do tend to actually have run-ins with the law. A lot of country singers, you know, get arrests for like, you know, alcohol. You know, they drink and they party, and same with the guys in hip hop.
Well, that's one of the things with like Johnny Cash. He never went to prison.
That's right.
He never went to Folsom Prison, but he said that the people in prison when he did that concert and did those songs, you know, they connected with them because they were basically coming from the same background. You know, so easy to identify with.
That would be the perfect example. Yeah. So. And to from what I understand, a lot of law enforcement didn't like him. A lot of law enforcement don't like certain country singers. A lot of the same with some rappers. They tend to have straight up like dislike of each other. And one of the theories I know especially with Biggie and Tupac was that they were supposedly killed not for what they represented, but just because I guess like some people, it's the conspiracy. The part I'd lend more credence to would be that they weren't as well investigated as they could have been.
Oh, okay. So it was just some like,
but
like
the real
turn the eye away from certain.
Now the real conspiracy supposedly is that like, you know, they were, I think it was West Coast and East Coast rappers, and there was a lot of tension between West Coast and East Coast gangs. And as Biggie and Tupac were becoming friends, it was thought to start bridging the gap between these, you know, two enemy coasts.
See, this is stuff I didn't know about.
And there was basically they're basically thought, I guess, that there was going to be like some sort of Warriors type event where they were going to create like super gangs that would like, you know, go rove, you know, can you dig it? And that they would all form together. And now clearly, that's just one of the conspiracy theories.
Crazy theory.
They thought that was like why these people had to die was because they were going to, you know, get all the gangs together, unite all the gangs,
and rise up.
Or just in general, you know, make people, you know, fight authority more. And the same thing with some of the country singers too, that they're giving people such a rebel attitude that they were, you know, like, yeah, man, I don't need the law and I can take problems out of my own hands. And then they say, you know, and you know, the sheriff of such and such county was like, no, they can't. So, you know, who's the one who knows what the most people look like whenever they die drinking? The law enforcement. And then how did he die? He died like that. And then, you know, just you can connect dots that aren't there, but maybe they are. But they probably aren't.
Probably not.
Notorious B.I.G. Was it Eazy-E? So there's a theory that he was purposely infected.
That Suge Knight? Because he did have that.
Suge Knight personally still has a lot of like conspiracy theories. I think he still is. He was supposedly the one who shook up Vanilla Ice off the edge of a building to get him to sign the rights over to his contract or something.
There was a whole bunch of stories.
And from what I've heard, it's like that's not what happened. Apparently, he did sort of like get into like I want the right. There was a dispute and it didn't end out in his favor. But from what I've understand, Vanilla Ice that straight up said like no, that didn't happen that way. I mean, he did want it. I didn't want to give it to him, and there was like, it was legal stuff. Which, to be fair, you could still bully somebody with lawyers, but he probably didn't hang him off the edge of a building because that sounds way too interesting. And it's hard to hold anybody by their feet, especially an adult.
I like how you think about this, all the physics and the
actual man. I mean, it's like feet are
it.
slippery. That's why it's so easy to take shoes off, but so hard to put them on.
Put them on. That is true.
Unless they're chunkless.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. The whole idea was that because in the movie, the NWA movie, what's it called? Straight Outta Compton. Yeah, they show the fight where Suge Knight does have an altercation with Eazy-E. They say in real life, supposedly, that Suge Knight had a needle that had been infected with HIV, and he stabbed Eazy-E with it during the confrontation. That's how he got infected. Mm-hmm. But they say it wouldn't have made him so sick so quickly and all this. You know, there's stuff to disprove it. But these conspiracies are still around.
Because just a quick little topic on HIV and AIDS, you do have to be careful whenever like you're handling needles that have blood contamination. There's tons of other viruses that can be in them, and the HIV virus is one of them.
Yeah.
But it is also pretty sensitive to temperature. Like if you're going to be walking around with it, it's like it's probably going to die pretty quickly on you. You know, it's like that's one of the I don't want to say benefits of it, but one of the bright sides is that blood is bad anytime. You don't want to touch it. You're more likely to get infected with like hepatitis. I believe the hepatitis are pretty resilient to temperature change, but HIV, AIDS, which is what Eazy did die of, that takes a good while. He probably caught it like years prior. It might have even been before he was famous at all, because it can be a virus in you for a long time. But the rapid deterioration, that means you've already got AIDS for a little bit and your immune system's gone to, heck. Yeah. And you've got another virus in you that's just tearing you apart.
Usually a lot of people with HIV die from pneumonia, I think, right?
It's a bit common. Like, just like viruses that are rhinovirus, the common cold. It just gets you, and it looks different than the common cold because it tears you apart so readily. It's just, most of the time our immune system can fight it off. Yeah.
So let's go back to this list. I guess the only other three people I have on the list that probably more famous is Amy Winehouse, who died in 2011 from alcohol poisoning.
Hers has one of the least amount of conspiracies about it.
Yeah.
Because I think, and here's the thing, the ones that have the most conspiracies are the ones that we know the least about. So people with Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, everybody's like, they were freeing people's minds and the authorities didn't want them. But people saw Amy Winehouse deteriorate on, and social media wasn't as big back then. So it was like on TV and on the tabloids, they'd see her running around, drunk on the street, and, she'd be slurring her speech on TV. And people were just now aware enough, like, clearly this woman has a drinking problem and she's had it for a while.
Have you seen the documentary about her?
Haven't.
That's an interesting documentary because it is stitched together from
what is it called?
It's called Amy.
Oh, just Amy?
Yeah, Amy.
Wow.
I forget the director's name, but he was a very interesting director who put this documentary together. But they took it from all behind-the-scenes footage that was shot. He didn't shoot any new interviews. He did get audio interviews with people around her, but it's basically the whole documentary is behind-the-scenes footage from coming up from when she was a little girl up until before she passed. And there was a lot of footage of her, people just basically like vlogging stuff that people would put out on YouTube. She was recording, or friends of her were recording, just hanging out and stuff, not meant to be released. But the director was able to get his hands and get
that makes me suspicious because this footage always pops up that wasn't never meant to be released, and it was just recorded. Maybe it's just I'm like so broke I've never had that easy access to a camera. Like, let's just record this conversation for fun that no one will ever see.
Back in the day when I was a kid, my mom had she got a camcorder, one of those VHS, and she was recording everything. We had tapes of anything.
So like to you it makes sense.
Yeah, like, I guess. I guess some or maybe it's a personality thing. Some people are like, I need to capture.
I could record everything on my phone, but I choose not to.
Yeah.
I guess it's something that's special whenever it's that device entirely for recording everything. Maybe.
The thing with that Amy Winehouse is like you see her in the documentary, coming from like a little regular young woman, in her teens, and seems like such a sweet, normal teenager.
Yeah.
Up until wanting to sing, and it was kind of more of like a thing, like it was a passion for her. She just loved singing, and then once she got into it, it was just like all this like tragic things just kind of like come into her life. Like she got married to one guy, and it was like a very destructive marriage. They separated. She would hook up with other people, have other relationships, and never work out. And she went back to her ex-husband a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of, you see, like you were saying, kind of the deterioration. It just seemed like, in a way, seemed like it was just gonna had to happen that way.
Yeah, just life choices though, not because like she couldn't handle the fame, not just because there was nefarious operators behind the scenes. Sometimes people make bad choices, and sometimes bad things happen to people who were making the right choices. Nothing you can do about it. It's sad. That's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. And another person who's on the list is Anton Yelchin. So he's the actor from Star Trek. He played.
Oh, that's right. Oh, he was 27.
He was 27.
Jeez.
The thing was, he had been playing in a punk band, kind of not professionally, but I guess that's.
What's a punk band? Yeah.
He had dabbled in music.
You're a professional punk band. You're not a real punk band.
So he had dabbled in music, and I know one of the movie he made, Green Room, one of the last movies he made.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it.
It's a crazy movie. It's not for everybody. It's a really good movie. He had to learn how to play, and I guess he had some experience playing music.
Oh, because it's about a punk band, right?
It is about a punk band who plays at a Nazi bar, and then they have to like fight their way out.
They did not see that coming.
They did not. But his is I guess
weird.
different because he died in a freak car accident where his SUV rolled back.
Basically, his house, the place where he lived, there's like the road, and then like the driveway to the houses is on a bit of an incline. And this particular brand of Jeep that he had was known to have a misfunction where if you didn't turn the parking brake on after you turned off the engine or something,
it was something strange like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Basically, it would put it in a neutral instead of park.
And it had been recalled, right?
They had begun a recall, but I guess it was. I don't want to throw myself into liability and guess what happened there, but it was a known issue. And what happened was he went to go check after he parked his car. He went to go check his mail, and on the way to the mailbox, it was one of those stone mailboxes, so people don't hit him with a baseball bat and knock him over. And on the way over, it just released and it rolled back real quick and pinned him to this brick mailbox in between the Jeep. And I heard it was not quick.
No. Well, I've heard different accounts. Someone said that he had gone within 10 minutes. I've heard
that's a long time. That's a long time. Okay, yeah. I'm not saying he was there for hours. I'm just saying if it wasn't instantaneous, it was a long time.
But this is one, because I remember when back in 94 when Kurt Cobain died, I remember hearing about it, and I wasn't aware of really who Kurt Cobain was. I remember hearing about Amy Winehouse when she died, and I hadn't listened to her music, but I remember being a film fan, knowing Anton Yelchin, and just being shocked at this. And it was a freak accident.
The definition of one. I mean, like, who thinks that's some like Final Destination stuff right there?
And wasn't it? It was around a holiday, wasn't it? I think.
I don't know. It was weird enough without adding stuff to it.
Yeah. But then the last person I have here, who's not the last person on the list, there was, like I said, there was another one more recently who passed away this past month. But this person passed away the end of last year. Kim Jong-hyun.
Yeah. Korean pop star.
Korean pop star. He was a lead singer in a band called, I'm looking for the name.
And he was also, I believe, a guitarist.
Shiny?
He played an instrument as well.
Yeah.
His death was a suicide.
His was suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning.
But here's the thing. One thing about that particular death, it was a suicide, but I found out about him a good little few months prior to his suicide because there was a big thing about, I check in on some of the K-pop stuff every now and then. Sometimes their world's a little interesting. Sometimes I like the music. But a thing that happened with him is he was a lead singer. I believe I also played guitar and piano. And his band was one of the bigger ones and was going real well. And he was known to like be really optimistic and like out there with his fans, always on social media. When people would bump into him, he was also too. He was he had like some stalkers or something. Somebody creeped on him, and he was on one of those lists where 13 things Korean K-pop stars have to go through that are ridiculous or their fans went crazy, and he was on one of those lists. And I guess that made him, he wanted to take a bit of a hiatus. There was some stuff happening about his management company, yada, yada, conspiracy stuff. Well, what happened was he was going to a restaurant to eat with some friends.
Okay.
This restaurant had glass pane windows and doors. supposedly whenever he was coming in or out, or he was sitting next to the door, but basically the glass pane part, the glass sort of fell out and it landed on him. Now, it wasn't particularly heavy, but apparently it cut up his hands enough that he had trouble playing, and that's what threw him into his depression.
Because I heard he had been dealing with depression
because of that.
Really,
now,
I didn't hear that.
And there's a big conspiracy. Yeah, like I said, it was like it just by chance. I happened to sort of follow this guy's story before his suicide.
So this happened. How long before the suicide?
Within a year.
Happened? Oh, okay.
No. I think from beginning to, because like I said, it was he got a stalker. He wasn't liking the way his managers were handling. Him dealing with stalkers and wanting time away from the band to be more time with family and stuff. And then he was supposedly in talks with another album cover people to get move his record label. He was in talks with different record labels supposedly, and I think it was supposed to be actually his family, but apparently they heard, and there's like a whole thing about North Korean voodoo basically, and did something to him, and that caused they didn't want to kill him, they wanted to wound him so that way he basically,
so there was a conspiracy that somebody did this on purpose.
This conspiracy, not mine, theirs, was that it was like their the label basically did some voodoo kind of thing. But also too, there's another one too that it was just they would send him to it was supposedly what do they call it? This restaurant was known for not putting was a good quality into their places, but other people no, it was a super freak accident because this restaurant was known for having quality everything. And why was this not? Why did this happen?
It only injured him.
It only injured him, even though it fell on a few people. He was the only one, I believe, who sustained serious injury. Okay. Now, don't take my 100% word for that. I'm sure people got cut up in there, but it's that. I mean,
but something serious.
There's no thing. He was the only serious one.
Seriously,
yeah. Okay. And it messed up his hands that he couldn't. He was trying, and he was even posting updates. I'm trying. I'm getting a little bit better every time, but he apparently wasn't, and that's what set him off into his depression. And he said too he had other issues, but it's I can imagine that'd be like if I guess Prince would have if he'd injured his hands. Yeah. He's known for his singing, but he loved playing instruments.
He was the awesome guitarist.
Mm-hmm. Terrible, man. Like I said, just by chance, I happen to know about that guy. And what are the chances? What are the chances?
So that's the one thing. The one question I have is because obviously since they just this other person who died at the end of the last month. They were able to qualify, I guess, for this list. I hate using that word there, but this is a thing that's probably going to keep going. So I'm wondering what other artists are going to pass
next?
away. Who's next?
Are you doing a countdown for Justin Bieber?
No, I'm not.
I'm a monster.
But I mean, what other? I don't know what other. If there's going to be other people and then say, okay, what's because of this, and everybody's going to talk about it again.
27 Club's just going to keep growing.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Hey guys, thank you for sticking around and watching the Roman Rodez Podcast. Thank you for watching this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want to see more of the stuff we're going to do, you can follow us here on YouTube, Roman Rodez on Facebook,
Roman Rodez
on Instagram,
Roman Rodez,
and on Twitter,
Roman Rodez.
Yeah.
ROMAN for Roman, RODEZ for Rose.
What was that?
RODEZ.
What was that?
RODEZ.
It's confusing and whatever, but
not that confusing.
Yeah.
But it is. It's the easier way to spell roads.
It is. That makes sense. It's phonetically correct.
Exactly. There's no silent letters.
There's no
which
H's.
Are unnecessary.
There's no.
You don't got to worry about no connifs.
Or conniptions.
Oh, exactly. Thanks, guys. Please like the video, subscribe if you can, and do share. We appreciate it. Thanks.
And if you have any topics that you want us to cover in these podcasts, please let us know in the comments down below or on Facebook. Shoot us a message.
Any commentary about the videos, about us, let us know.
If we ramble too much,
we don't.
If we don't spend enough time on a certain topic, let us know what you want to hear.
We'll totally come back to stuff if you think we should cover it more. If we got anything wrong, we'll do our best to fix it. Thanks, guys. Keep an eye out for our medleys.
Yes.
There's shorter videos that you can share easier, and if you like a topic from one of those, tell us. We'll expand it into a full podcast.
Yeah, because we can talk for hours.